Hello YouTube, it's Lion here with Hobbies of Man once again, and today we are doing another comic book review. Now today, we are going to do a review on Saga, volumes 1, 2, and 3. Now I do want to try to keep this as spoiler free as possible, but I am mostly going to be talking about things that come up in volume 1 anyways, just because I can't really talk about anything if I can't tell you what happens in the first volume. So, yeah. There we go. Now, this is written by Brian K. Vaughan and illustrated by Fiona Staples. Now, she does a really good job with the illustrations here. I really enjoy it. Although, I don't think she's the one that does the coloring. Let me see. It usually tells you right here. Yeah, the coloring, well, I guess it is done by her. Because Phonographics does the lettering. And then the coordinator for the work is Eric Stevenson. So, there you go. I guess she does do the coloring, so that's cool. I do actually like it a lot, but I'll talk about that in its own section later. Now, this is published by Image Comics, as you guys can see right there. And the demographic here is adult. It's rated M for mature, as it says down there. I think that is legible enough. And the genres here are epic, as in epic fantasy, or epic... what's the proper term, like a literary epic, like those old, Greek stories, like the Odyssey and the Iliad and stuff like that, and the Epic of Gilgamesh and stuff, but also in the epic fantasy type of feel, right? It's also a space opera. This is a kind of melodramatic, slightly kind of more like down-to-earth space story that really has a lot of crazy stuff going on around it. It's also fantasy and sci-fantasy as well. This is basically very similar to Star Wars in the fact that it's a fantasy story that happens in space. And it's so cool. Now, this does not have an adaptation, and as far as we know, it's never going to, because Brian K. Vaughan does not want an adaptation of his work. Whether that's going to be true or not, depending on how much money they offer him, is completely different from, what he has said, right? But so far, the idea is that this is never going to have an adaptation because he doesn't want it to be. So, there you go. Now, the premise here is basically that there's two people from opposing civilizations, right? That are at war with each other. And through a very weird and convoluted process, they end up falling in love and having a child, right? Now, this child poses an immense threat to both civilizations, both planets, because it shows that, the war is really not important. And so what happens is that this family is now on the run from hundreds of different types of groups of people that are interested in these guys. And they basically have to figure out a way to live on the run and kind of provide their child with, all of the things the child needs, while also escaping from the two governments, from their two civilizations, as well as some bounty hunters, and all sorts of crazy hijinks ensue. And it's super cool. I really did enjoy this story. I'm so happy that Darth Penn told me about it, and, got me to read it, because it's so good. It's so enjoyable. Now, let's jump into the review here. The plot line is great. It's oddly simple. It's about a family on the run, and, basically, they're always trying to be one step ahead of all of the other people, right? And that's kind of like the broader plot line, but specifically in Volume 1, it's mostly about being able to leave the planet that they're on, right? But through the process of trying to leave this planet, we kind of engage with a big, complex cast of characters that allows us to have a lot of side plot lines and kind of like ideas percolating throughout your mind as we kind of like switch viewpoints to all of these other different characters and kind of see how they're going about their lives as it kind of all revolves around, these characters that are our main people, which are these characters right here, Marco, Alana, and Hazel. And it's really cool, and there's a very thrilling type of kind of story element here because they're on the run. So there's always kind of that like fear that something's going to happen, which keeps everything very kind of interesting and high energy, as well as having this kind of very captivating narration that is kind of like looking backwards in time from Hazel's current time period, which is, farther in the future where she's kind of grown up. And it's cool. Usually I don't like this type of story that is structured in that way because it makes it so that all of the tension that the character goes through, all of the moments where you could feel that they might die, obviously don't happen because the character is narrating it to you, as he's telling you the story, right? So I don't like it usually, but in this kind of situation, it actually works. Mostly because you kind of forget about it, while also knowing that it's always there because every couple of chapters, the narration continues. And I like it a lot. It's a very interesting kind of usage of that kind of narration style that works really nicely, and it doesn't have most of the usual drawbacks that it would have. Like sometimes in My Hero Academia, I don't feel that Deku's ever in trouble because the story literally starts with, this is how I became the greatest hero, right? So obviously he's going through these types of things, right? And the same thing with Name of the Wind, which is Patrick Rothfuss's epic fantasy story. Kind of, that one's even worse because every few chapters we come back to him talking and it's always like, oh yeah, I could have died. But it's like, dude, but you didn't because you're right here telling me that you didn't die. So what's the point of the story, right? So, but that's a whole different tangent. I like that the narration didn't have its usual drawbacks, and I am very happy about that. Now, this whole kind of lovers on opposite sides of the war is a very like Romeo and Juliet type of storyline, and with the baby being born and stuff like that, it's very interesting. And we basically focus on the young couple as they're on the run, and there's lots of starts and stops and a lot of kind of character tension between the characters about how they're in this situation, but they really don't know that much about each other because it was better for them to not know while they were together. And it's so cool because there's so many different things that come up and pop up that really kind of go kind of change the story a little bit to make it seem a lot more complex than its basic structure, right? And there's quests, there's things where they have to go somewhere to get something, the whole hunt for the MacGuffin. There's just so many cool things here that are just so fun that Brian K. Vaughan managed to weave together into this very solid story that I quite like. Now let's talk characters. They're all great. I really enjoy them. They're also kind of weird, but I think that's kind of the charm that kind of adds to them. Now we have Hazel, who is the narrator, the little baby girl. But I would also kind of say that she's the main character in the sense that like everything revolves around her. Like she is the center of the story, but because she's a baby, she doesn't actually have any autonomy or any actual relation to the plot line. She's just kind of like the thing everyone kind of carries along, which is kind of funny. But I really like her, and I liked her narration, like I said earlier, because it's very cool. And I would actually say that the main focus of the story is actually not just on her, but on her parents, Alana and Marco. Now, Marco is a Wreathian, or someone from Wraith, which is the moon that orbits Landfall, which is where Alana's from. And Landfall and Wraith have always been at war for some weird reason. Probably something to do with resources or some, basic, not very important kind of idea that just perpetuates this whole kind of like war thing, right? And the war has spread out further into the galaxy, and now every type of like group of people is involved in this. And I like them both because they're like ex-military, so they have tough, dark past, and they have, a very kind of like, we got to do what we got to do kind of attitude. And it's very interesting and really important because it also kind of informs their current like versions of themselves, right? Marco wants to be a pacifist. Marco wants to lay down his weapons and become someone that doesn't need them in order to live. And Alana is really kind of reticent about that, and she wants to continue to have her weapons to protect her family, but knows that weapons are not enough, so she's kind of floundering to try to find, what it is that will be enough to help her and her family. And that's very interesting. I like their characters are just so, maybe not relatable, because I don't necessarily relate to the idea of having a child, and kind of wanting to take care of it, right? Because I'm not in that point in my life. But what I'm saying is that their ideas and the kind of way that they want to go about is very understandable, and it's so kind of like empathic, I guess. Like, you just want to connect with them and see how they succeed, and it's just so cool. The connection you build with these characters is so interesting. There's also a few other characters. There's Isabel, which is kind of like the spunky teenager character, and she comes in a kind of very interesting way because she ends up being a ghost, essentially. And it's quite cool. I actually like it a lot because she brings a lot of levity, but also kind of like young, like that whole kind of idea that young people aren't not wise just because they're young kind of idea. And she kind of comes up with a few interesting kind of ideas and thoughts to share with everyone else that are very helpful to the story and that kind of like resonate with others as well. So it's very cool. I really enjoy her as a character. And we also have Clara, who is Marco's mother. And she's like such a badass warrior character. I just love her so much. She's so cool. And we have a bunch of other secondary characters, right? But the other two that are most important, I think, are the Will, which is a bounty hunter kind of guy. It kind of reminds me of like the clones from the Clone Wars TV show. It kind of looks like that. It's kind of cool, but like, I don't know. He's very interesting. He has this giant like cat that can tell if you're lying, and he's kind of really weird because he's one of those like bounty hunters that will kill anyone as long as the price is right, but then also has some sort of like odd code of morality that really doesn't make sense, but that is actually very meaningful. And it's very cool. I also like him a lot. And then we have the weirdest character, Robot 4, who is a prince of this robot country. And he's like the main person that's chasing after Marco, Alana, and Hazel. And he's messed up in the head. He's really, really odd and very weird. And it's just so like interesting because like, what the hell's up with this guy? He's a robot. He's like a person with a CRT TV head, and it's so funny. He's just so odd. I like him a lot in character design, and I guess his like the themes and explorations of his character are also very interesting. But the personality he has is horrible. I don't like it. So he's so cool in like a very kind of weird, complex way that I really enjoy. Now, world building here is great. Super cool. The exposition happens through action. So we're in the middle of a battle scene, and then Marco has to do something, and it's like, damn, we need to learn a little bit about the magic system. So he's just going to throw out some information that is impactful and makes sense. And then he shows you how that information has to do with what he's trying to do. So like, basically, magic requires ingredients according to Marco's people. And in order to use them, he kind of like has to find the ingredient before he uses the spell, and it requires them to kind of have to go on these like short quests in order to get the ingredients when necessary, or kind of develop some sort of idea in the plot line really quickly through the action here. And it's very cool. The exposition in that way is very interesting. I like it a lot. I don't know that there's like obviously a lot of other stories do exposition through action very often. But like none in such a cool way, in my opinion. Like the few that I know off the top of my head aren't really as interesting as this. So it's kind of cool. I like that a lot. There's also some clear exposition via conversation, which is also some of my favorite type of exposition. I really hate when it's just like, okay, here's a bunch of stuff that you have to read it before we actually get into the story. I hate that stuff. So when we weave in the exposition and the kind of development of the world building into conversation and action, it's so much more interesting to read. I like it so much. And yeah, overall, there's just some really cool, wacky ass magical stuff. There's like, what's it called? There's ships made of trees. There's ships made of dragon bones. There's spells, high-tech stuff, robots, trolls, some weird thumb people. Like, there's just so many weird ass things that are just so cool, and I like it so much. This story is just a weird amalgamation of everything that you could ever want that you didn't know you needed, and it's so interesting. I know I say that so much, but like there's really no other way to describe this. It's just cool. So the art here is very good. I love the colors and I love the character designs, and the creature designs are all very cool. Well, some of them I could have done without. Like there's this one scene where there's this giant troll and he's naked and it was not pretty, but like it's funny. So like, okay. And yeah, I would describe this art style as realistic cartoon, because the art style and the way that the expressions work are very realistic looking, but the coloring makes it look really cartoon-esque because it seems to be very flat with simple shadows, right? So it has kind of this interesting, what's it called? Duality to it. I don't know. Like it's just interesting, and it looks appealing, and it's kind of nice, but it doesn't try to be super realistic, if that makes sense. I don't know. I have to check out Fiona Staples' other works to see if it's like the style she has, or if it's like something that they made together in order for Saga to have like its own specific art style. So yeah, but I really like it. It just looks really nice. Now, fan service wise, well, there's lots of sex and lots of naked characters and hot characters all around. So if you're really not interested in that, maybe don't read this. But this is definitely a mature rated story, and it shows that it's mature very early on, very often. So, you know, be sure to watch out for that if you don't want to kind of experience stuff like that. So there you go. Now, the rating for this is an easy 5 out of 5. I loved it. I don't necessarily know that I can call it unique, because this does feel like an amalgamation of so many different things, like Star Wars, epic fantasy stories like Lord of the Rings, and, you know, Star Wars and Game of Thrones and stuff like that. And there's so many different kind of things that we've seen before, but that just have a different feel to them in this story that I really don't know if I can call it unique, but the end product is definitely unique, even if like the pieces of it are not. And it's just super wild and interesting and super enjoyable. I just like it so much. It's one of those weird things where it's like you read it and you immediately know you like it, but trying to figure out why you like it is a lot harder to do. And that's why I read this a couple days ago, and I'm still not sure that I know why I like it, but I'm trying my best for the review, so there you go. Now, I definitely recommend this title if you're an adult or, you know, a mature reader, if you're like a teenager. I don't know, I don't really care. But like, if you're okay with all of this weird stuff that happens here, you should read this. It's so cool, it's so good, it's so interesting. And it's just possibly one of the best comics ever. Like, I don't know, a lot of people seem to think so. And although my comic book knowledge isn't that great, if we're talking superhero comics, like this is significantly better than most of those, just because superhero comics aren't really like that deep. So there you go. This is just so good. And now, similar stories here. Well, Star Wars, Game of Thrones, which are the two that are most often mentioned. Like, I think there was a tagline that said, you know, if Star Wars met Game of Thrones, and I don't necessarily see the Game of Thrones aspect that much, beyond the fact that, you know, characters die and there's this kind of like high fantasy, low fantasy type of thing going on. But I understand what they're trying to say, and I think it fits because there's a lot of that political intrigue type of stuff that is super important in Game of Thrones. So there you go. I don't know that it's similar to anything I've read though, like personally, like anything I've reviewed, at least. Obviously it's similar to Game of Thrones, and I've read a bit of that, and it's similar to Star Wars, and I've watched and read a lot of that. But like something I've reviewed on the channel, I don't think that there's anything that kind of fits this. So yeah, I don't really know what to recommend and kind of what to compare this with beyond what is, you know, been told to me. So there you go. That's it for that, I guess. Now, that's actually it for the video as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And if you did, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment down below. Let me know what you thought. Have you read Saga? How do you like it? And if not, are you willing to check it out? So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching once again. I really do appreciate it, and see you guys later.